today is a very big day for me because I am, as of, 6 o'clock this evening, I am officially vaccinated because 2 weeks ago at about 6:30 was when I got my second shot of Moderna. And so I am ready to party, except not really. I haven't changed anything and don't really plan on changing much, but nevertheless, at least I can walk around without fear of catching something that will make me dead. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how we all like slowly warm back up to things. Like I think some people never stop doing anything. Some people are going to, jump right into it the second they're allowed to. I think a lot of people are going to have a much slower ramp back to like, quote normal, or at least like, quote unrestricted behavior. Like it's weird. Like, so today, literally just today, I was waiting outside my school to pick up my kid. And I heard from one of the other residents that the town has officially dropped the outdoor mask mandate. And I mean, first of all, I don't know if I should verify that. I probably should, but also like I thought, okay, well, should I take my mask off? Like in theory, I'd want to, but like, how many people around town know that they've dropped the mask mandate? Mm-hmm. Like, am I going to appear like a jerk if and even though the president. And that's a phrase that we can now respect again. Said, basically as that we don't need to really be wearing masks outside as much anymore. Except in certain circumstances, but for the most part, like in most circumstances, we don't really need to be doing that. But like, it still seems like I don't know if I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable that I'm no longer at risk. Even though I'm not, I still have one more week before my 2-week notice after my vaccine is up. But I'm also confident that, the risk of outdoor transmission that we now know, especially in a place full of windy, fresh air like here, is extremely low. But like, when will I feel comfortable feeling okay being seen not wearing a mask by other people?
Right.
That's a tricky thing. And like, And I wouldn't judge anyone else for their choice now, because now that it's like pretty much truly optional for most conditions outside. I'm saying I don't care if somebody wears it or not anymore, but I wouldn't want to appear like one of those like anti-masker people in general.
The problem you're having is your red computers hat all over again, because by not putting a mask on, depending on where you are and what you're doing and who you're around, that kind of implies a certain set of politics that I'm pretty darn confident you don't want to imply.
A degree of redness, would you say?
Yeah, a degree of redness. Mm-hmm. So I totally understand. I don't know. For me, as I think I might have said on the show, and certainly I've said on Analog, the math is a little weird for me because, what with the kids being so young, they're not going to be offered a vaccine anytime soon. There was actually rumblings that I saw in the last 24 hours that Pfizer may ask for 2 through 12 years old in September or something like that. I think that's right.
Oh, wow.
Which would be great for my family. But because we have such small kids, and because I haven't seen enough evidence that, once you're vaccinated, you really don't emit the virus enough to worry about it. I think that is what people are guessing, but no, I haven't seen real good evidence from it. So anyway, because of that, I don't think my world is going to change that much. I perhaps won't be allergic to the indoors, as I like to joke, anymore, but I certainly don't plan on loitering indoors. As a silly example, I used to love going to the library to do work, and I don't plan on picking that up again anytime soon. I might go outdoors somewhere to do work, but I don't plan on going indoors to just sit for hours and do work like I used to in the before times. But everyone has their own thresholds, right? And at least what gives me incredible joy, no sarcasm intended, is that, at least for the three of us and our families, we are very, very close to being at the point that we get to make these decisions again, rather than feeling like those decisions were made for us. So that's super great. And Marco, you said you got yours, a week ago Tuesday? Is that right? Your second shot?
Yeah. So
by the time we record next, you will be vaccinated. And John, I know you got your first, but I don't recall you haven't gotten your second yet.
I got my second this morning.
Oh, excellent.
Oh,
hooray.
In the grand tradition of all ATP hosts apparently deciding to get vaccinated on the night we record, here I am.
Delightful. All right, how you feeling?
My arm hurts. My muscles in the back of my neck are a little stiff. I have a mild headache, but, I can't complain. It's like nothing, right? Maybe it'll get worse tonight or something, but so far, it's fine.
Yeah, I feel like I had it pretty easy. Like, I mean, the hive issue predated the shot. By the way, I fixed the hives. Well, they fixed themselves. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, we had Pfizer here, and I basically had, Tiff and I both had the day after, we were just very tired. But after that, then it was fine. And the hives turned out, so I'll never actually know, because it could have been my illegal cold that I mentioned last time, because the cold symptoms went away like at the same time that the hives stopped. I ended up having like 4 or 5 nights of them. But it also, the onset and then offset of the hives. What's the corresponding word for when the symptoms go away? Anyway, it corresponded very strongly to when we had Adam's birthday balloons in the house. Now, normally, I don't have issues with like latex or anything like that that might cause, that might be related to balloons. But these balloons, there were 2 things about them. Number one, I blew up like half of them. Like Tiff and I stayed up one night, blew up the balloons ourselves, and there were probably 50 or 100 balloons in here. There were a lot. And they were really cheap Amazon balloons, and they kind of smelled a little funny.
Uh-oh.
So I'm wondering if there might have been like some weird chemical in or on them that I was reacting to. And the hive started that night that we blew them all up. And then they went away after we popped them all and threw them away.
Oh, that's wild.
So it's very
As
likely.
I said when you discussed this earlier, that I really like. I know you don't want to do this, but like you can find the answer. Just get the balloons again, like for science.
No,
like it's, you because now you're just like, maybe it was the balloons, maybe it wasn't. Oh, they smelled funny. Okay, fine. Like we can know this is knowable. You can't catch the cold again, but you can get the balloons again, and then we can know for sure. Just get one balloon. Just like rub it on your arm. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if one balloon would do it. I don't know.
Well, then you're just going to have to blow up 50 balloons again. But just think of how the frontiers of science, personal science that you would be probing. You'd be like, because for now, it's just going to be a mystery. It's like, maybe all balloons are a threat to me. But you can know this answer.
But also, like, we are a balloon family. We have balloons in the house very frequently and often in large numbers. Like, any birthday, any occasion, there's balloons in our house. I've never had a problem. That's why I think, like, I don't think it's, like, all latex or something like that. It's probably, like, something that was specific to these balloons that was a problem. Or maybe just how much, that I was blowing them up.
You can get these balloons again.
Can I? I mean, who knows? Like, on Amazon stuff, you never know. Like, can you get the same thing twice? Sometimes.
What about your bell?
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, that's the whole mystery of Amazon. When you order ostensibly the same product, maybe they're shelved all together, and you have no idea which one you're getting. But if they look the same and they had that same funny smell, then you would know. Yeah. And knowing is half the battle. The other half is getting to the emergency room fast enough if it turns out you're allergic.
Yeah, right. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
That's why they do those challenges like the doctor's office. It's like you should know what you're allergic to, but so you go to the doctor and they give you the little pinprick with like 3 molecules of shrimp or something to find out if you're allergic,
Yeah, they don't do it when you live on an island with no hospitals on it.
Well, I know, but you can bring the balloons to the doctor and say, "Hey, doc, am I allergic to these?"
So moving right along, we should make a few notes about the store. Wait, what store, you ask? Well, guess what? It's the ATP Store, which is back. It'll be here through the weekend after this episode comes out and up until the following weekend, so until May 14th. That is when the store closes. To recap, we have all sorts of fun stuff for you this year. We don't have a flamethrower yet. We're working on it. But we do have the new M1 shirt in both colorful and monochrome editions. To reiterate, the colorful one is darned expensive, but I assure you, believe it or not, we're making like no money on it because it's just expensive to print on both sides in a million colors. The monochrome one is a little less expensive and also a little less colorful. We also have the ATP Performance shirt, which is a moisture wicking, exercise kind of shirt. The ATP Pint Glass, which we're going to talk about a little more in a second. And of course, the classic ATP logo shirt and pin. All of these are available at a store near your nearest web browser. Anyway, the ATP pint glass is dishwasher safe because it is engraved or etched. What's the word I'm looking for? Is it etched?
Etched.
Okay, thank you. It is dishwasher safe. So unlike the mugs where it was, paint on the outside of the mugs, this is etched, so it shouldn't be a problem. And also, we need to talk a little bit about a little wonkiness that happened, especially in the first day or so of the store. And then some of that wonkiness is actually persisting. So here's the thing. Cotton Bureau does all of our fulfillment and all that, and they print the shirts for us, and they do fulfillment for the glasses and the pins and everything. We love them. They're very reliable, very easy to work with. They're great over there. The shipping costs, however, might be a little wonky. So COVID has made international shipping in particular a mess. Now, those of you who have ordered from us in the past internationally, I say without hyperbole and without sarcasm, like I know it's been expensive, like really expensive. And I'm genuinely, honestly sorry for that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about it. We've used other printers in the past that have had like offices or manufacturing plants in Europe, and it's been a real mess, like a real mess. And it stinks that these are so expensive to ship. I totally get that. And if it's too much money for you, or you just don't think it's worth it, totally understand. You can still throw us money by going to atp.fm/join, but you don't have to do that either. There's a new shipping program that Cotton Bureau is using for overseas stuff. It is faster and more reliable, but hey, guess what? That means it's more expensive. So again, I totally understand that it is expensive and it's tough, and I am we are genuinely sorry about that.
No, just you.
Additionally, it's all of us. Yeah, it's just me. I'm the only one that started. The other two don't care. No.
It's all your fault. First of all, the entire world of global shipping and customs and VAT and everything else is all Casey's fault, and he exclusively is very sorry for it.
Yep, that's you got it. That's exactly right. Additionally, there was some wonkiness early on, particularly with the performance tee. The shipping, I guess, some metadata was a little askew within Cotton Bureau's own systems, and so the shipping was way more expensive, particularly with the performance tee, than it was intended to be. If you ordered the performance tee already and you feel like, yeah, my shipping was too much money, well, either that's how much it costs, or if you were afflicted by this particular wonkiness, when the sale actually goes through, because remember that's Kickstarter style, when the sale actually goes through, you will get the correct pricing when your credit card is charged. And then if you are seeing ridiculous shipping even for domestic addresses, so there's a couple of things that could be going on here. First of all, the pint glasses ship priority mail, so you might want to think about putting the pint glasses in a separate order, or at least trying and seeing if that makes a difference. And then if you're seeing something wherein the shipping is still bananas, go ahead and give Cotton Bureau a holler. They're really responsive on Twitter, or even better, support@cottonbureau.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. They're really, really great. We love Cotton Bureau, despite what it may sound. We love Cotton Bureau. They've been great to us over the years. So much better than other people we've used. So again, on behalf of all three of us, I apologize for my role in blocking the Suez Canal and for escalating the cost of international shipping everywhere, but we are all very sorry.
The other thing I'll add is sometimes people try to order and like the website tells them, oh, we can't ship it to you because it can't make sense of your address in some way. Sometimes that's because Cotton Bureau doesn't ship to your country, which is a bummer, but oh well. But sometimes it's because it does ship, like you live in like Canada or something, and it's like, oh, we can't ship to you, and that's not right. So you contact Cotton Bureau and say, hey, here's what my actual address is. What do I have to do to make it so that this is understood by your system? And so most of the time you can get through that. So keep trying. And then the other product bit of follow-up I have is, Casey ran through all the products, and he mentioned the last one, the pins, which are basically, I guess, our version of the HomePod, where we manufactured them. Well, we manufactured them twice. We manufactured the pins once, and we sold out of all of them. Like, because the pins are different. We have to buy them all up front. It's not like the print-on-demand shirts. The pins are some things in Cotton Bureau are stock, and some of them are print-on-demand. But the pins were like, hey, tell us how much you want to order, pay for them all up front, and then we sell them. So we did that. We bought a bunch of pins, we sold them, and we're like, great, let's do that again. We bought a bunch of pins, and we've been selling that same batch of pins for what, 2.5 years? 3 years?
Might even be more than that, yeah.
It's just, we cannot get rid of these pins. And it's fine, like, it's not a big deal. They're tiny, they don't take up a lot of room in the warehouse or whatever, right? But I think in this particular sale, we will probably run out of pins. So if for some reason for the past 3 years you've been like, I'd like a pin, but not that much. If you want one, you should buy one now, because the odds of us ordering more of these pins is very low.
Yeah.
Because apparently nobody wants them anymore. And in fact, I emailed Cotton Bureau and said, how many pins do we have? Because I thought like when the numbers ticked over, I'm like, that's all the pins, right? But then it kept going up. I'm like, is this like a bottomless pit of pins? How many pins are actually left? And they told me, and there was like I think we were down to like 10 pins or something like that. I forget how many it was, but they're like, because they reserve extras too for like, if your pin gets damaged, they want to replace it or whatever. So there is a tiny amount of extras they reserve, but I think it is conceivable that we could run out of pins. If we don't run out of pins in this sale, next sale, the first 3 people to buy pins are going to sell it out. So if you want a pin, buy a pin. If not, good riddance to pins.
Wow.
I like the pins. I think it's a cool pin. I don't understand why we didn't sell more. But, anyway, this is probably the last you're going to be seeing of pins for a while. So
at least for a while. That's right. All right. So again, atp.fm/store. Don't be that person tweeting me on the day after the sale ends, sometimes literally minutes after the sale ends. Of course, a lot of people queue it up now because I make such a big deal out of it. But then there's that person that you can tell they ain't messing around. They genuinely missed it. So if you're driving, pull over. If you're walking, pull to the side. Do what you need to do. atp.fm/store, or alternatively, atp.fm/join, or just tell someone you love about how much you love the show. That works too. Moving right along, my fans. I had talked. This is not the people. This is the spinning kind of fan. The last week we talked about these RF controlled fans that I have, and I didn't know how to make them work with HomeKit. I don't recall where I was in the journey specifically with hacks for ways to fix this, but a lot of people recommended Bond, and I'll find a link and put it in the show notes.
James Bond,
James Bond, shaken, not stirred. Bond Home or something like that, which is a box that basically will interface with either RF or IR. So you could say control a TV or something like that. And you can get a Homebridge plugin that works with that. I do plan to try that if my new alternative plan doesn't work. And so we had to take the fans down that were in the screened-in porch for reasons that are mostly uninteresting, but we had to take them down for a little bit. And I noticed that there is the RF controller that's in the wall, where any standard light switch or fan switch would be. And then there's an RF receiver, not literally in the fan, but sitting where the fan is mounted. And basically the wires go from the wall unit to the receiver, and then from the receiver to the fan. Well, as it turns out, I'm almost positive that the wires within the wall, which I haven't opened up yet, or, behind the plate, those wires, I believe, match the wires going into the fan. So my theory and my hope is that if I just take out this RF box, which is, that's by design, it's not permanently attached or anything like that. It's in fact, it comes detached. If I take away that RF box and then put in my Lutron Caseta fan switches, I think that might work. So that's what I'm going to try. I probably won't be able to for another week, maybe 2, for, again, uninteresting reasons. But that's the theory. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to try this Bond Home. I forget, James Bond, whatever it's called. I'll put a link in the show notes.
We are sponsored this week by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com/ATP. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with Squarespace. It is super easy to make websites with Squarespace. It's simple as that. There is no software installation, no package management, no server management, no keeping the servers up and running and protecting against, DDoS and security stuff. None of that stuff. You don't even have to be a web developer. You don't even have to know HTML. You don't have to be a designer. You don't have to be a nerd like us. You can just be a regular person with no experience, no coding skills, nothing like that, regardless of your skill level. Squarespace is for you. There's no coding required. Everything is done with intuitive, easy-to-use visual tools. And there is so much functionality built right into Squarespace. You don't have to worry about managing plugins and stuff like that. It's just all built in. And whether you're hosting a simple site for a few pages of information about yourself or your business, all the way up to relatively complex things to host elsewhere, things like hosting a storefront or even a podcast, you can do all of that with Squarespace. It's all built in. You can see for yourself by starting a free trial site at squarespace.com/ATP. And this is a real free trial. There's no credit card required. You don't have to give them any money or any payment information to get started. And you can build the entire site in that state without giving them any money or any credit card. You can build the whole site. And when you're ready to launch, and I bet you will be, go back there, squarespace.com/ATP, and use offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. That's squarespace.com/ATP, offer code ATP for 10% off your first purchase. Next time you need to make a website, give Squarespace a try. You won't regret it, and I guarantee you'll be very happy with the results you get. So thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show. Make your next move with Squarespace.
Speaking of spending money, ATP purchases. So we talked about AirTags, and we're going to talk a little more about that later. I ordered my Apple TV, and after all my kvetching, I actually got the big boy. I got the 64 gig, and mostly because people said, well, what about those screensavers? And I'm a sucker for the screensavers. So I did get the big boy, and it will be delivered at the end of the month. And oh, man, am I excited for it. I am super stoked. Marco, I suspect you did not buy any TVs, but did you buy any remotes?
I'm sad to say that I bought both.
You bought a TV too?
Yeah, I bought a TV.
You sucker. You're as bad as I am.
And I even bought the big one for the exact same damn reason.
Wow, I infected both of you with this virus of when else can you double the storage of an Apple product for $20?
You did.
As I said, you can't afford not to buy the big one.
Yeah, I did. So my plan was like, right now in my house I have a 4K on the upstairs TV, and I have the old HD model on the downstairs TV. Both TVs are actually 4K TVs, so I got one new Apple TV. I will demote the previous Apple TV 4K to the other TV that had the HD model previously. So I'm basically moving it down the line. And the new one, I did indeed get the stupid 64 gig for $20 stupid more, because the stupid screensavers are actually like one of my favorite things about the Apple TV. And
they really are.
And if that increases the space to cache screensavers, and therefore maybe includes more of them in my regular rotation than it otherwise would have, that alone is worth it to me.
But it doesn't. I mean, we were joking about this yesterday, but we did joke, like, we all have gigabit connections to our house. Like, the extra storage space is not, I'm going to say right now, is not going to let you access more screensavers. It's not going to increase things in the rotation. They can just stream. You have a gigabit connection, but you do have more space. So there's that.
Yeah. So just in case it ever becomes useful, yeah, stupid $20. All right, fine. So anyway, and I also, I got a additional remote of the new remote type for the downstairs TV. So even though I'm not giving it the new model, I'm going to have that good remote on both TVs, allegedly. I hope it's actually good. I mean, that's one thing. Like, none of us have actually tried it yet. Like, no one's reviewed the remote yet. We don't actually know if it actually is good.
Can it be worse though? Really? Like, it's hard. Really hard to make it worse.
That's fair.
Like, there are certain aspects of it that we know immediately are better. Hey, it's not symmetrical. It's easier to know which way is up without looking at it, or with looking at it for that matter. And it is thicker, and it has a curved bottom, and the entire top of it isn't a touch surface. And these are the type of things that are certainly improvements. Now, above and beyond that, maybe it also has its own problems or whatever. You're right that we don't know, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that if you really, really hate the current remote, this one is almost certainly going to be somewhat of an upgrade.
Yeah. Now, I did also buy AirTags. Excuse me, I bought a 4-pack of AirTag. That is apparently how it is labeled. They are interesting. So I bought them, and I had this 4-pack. So I was great. Let me open this up, activate the tag, and I thought, okay, I'll put one in my backpack. Maybe that sounds good. But the main thing I wanted to put it on were our primary bikes in the family, and the wagon that we bring to and from the boat for like freight hauling, because these are things that we will often leave unattended in town for a while and unlocked to things. And so I figured it could be, a measure of kind of casual theft prevention or whatever. And sometimes it's nice to know, like, did my kid ride his bike, from the playground to a nearby friend's house? That way I can locate my kid if he doesn't have his Apple Watch on. So I figured, we should all have them on our bikes, and that's 3 bikes and 1 wagon. Perfect. Okay. So I get my AirTag 4-pack, and great, these nice little round, beautiful little objects. How do I attach these to anything?
Have you considered a $450 piece of leather?
The AirTags are yet another like wonderful example of Apple's design failure, actually, of like designing an object to be beautiful at the significant expense of actual usability, because what you need with an AirTag, this might be intentional, you need to attach this to something in almost every case. Like I could tuck one into a pocket in my backpack without modifying anything. Okay, great. But literally anything else I would use it for, I need to attach it somehow. Now, I could just use a roll of electrical tape. That's one option. That doesn't work for certain things. Like, we had friends ask, like, could I put one on my dog collar in case my dog gets lost or something like that? Well, no, you can't actually, unless you go buy something else. And this is where they get you. So if you'll notice, if you go to Apple's site or we'll stick with Apple for now. We'll cover Amazon in a second. But like, you go to Apple's site, great. You can buy the AirTag for $25 to $30, but you're going to need something else with almost every single AirTag you buy. And the options that Apple sells to hold your AirTag are all A, pretty bulky, and B, they're all like $15 and up. More, a lot of them are closer to $20, $30, $40. So it seems like Apple designed these in order to sell more accessories besides just them. Like, I think this is just like accessory revenue generation here. And if they would have designed it with a simple keyring hole on one side, which is how like Tile and everything else, those are all designed that way, then many of us could just stick a cheap hardware store, keyring thing through it and attach it to lots of different things. Or if we wanted to use some other kind of, silicone holder, we still could. But because they designed them the way they did, prioritizing like basically visual purity and possibly in an effort to increase accessory sales, both of which I think are likely contributors to this design, they end up being like kind of useless if you just get the AirTags. Now, you can go to, lots of people have announced things like there's, of course, like a Belkin kit that Apple sells that's basically like a keyring attached to a big plastic case that goes around the AirTag. Okay, that's nice. If you're putting it like on a big dog's collar, that's probably the way to go, something like that. Our friends over at, I think it was Elevation Lab, announced a very similar kind of thing. None of these things are shipping until like June, but so that, there's products like that. You can go on Amazon now, and there's a million like cheap no-name things that are $8 to $12, most of which appear that no one has actually gotten them and used them yet, because they don't seem to have legitimate reviews because it just hasn't been enough time. The AirTags just shipped a few days ago to the first buyers. So I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm on this. Like, okay, this is great. This will be fun this will be useful if I ever need it. But I can't imagine like a more like obtuse design than what they went with, because you just can't attach it to anything. Like it's like a UFO shaped disc with curved edges. You can't strap it down like with a cable tie, like with Velcro. You can't, because it just slides out. You obviously can't put a ring around it. You can't like mount it into or onto anything very securely because it'll just slip out because of its shape. And so like they literally did nothing to accommodate the idea to actually attach this to something. So it's like the very first iPad, the first generation iPad, and the only case that you could get for it was like Apple's that big like black rubbery one that kind of just clamped around it on all sides, because the original iPad made no accommodation for cases. And that's one of the things they changed with the iPad too. They added the magnetic mounts on the side so you could have the smart case. Well, this has like no affordances for attachment whatsoever. So you're going to end up having all these like big, expensive, little custom mount things and keyring straps and all these little things. And Apple sells a bunch of them, and I'm sure they will. But like, then the result is you put this thing, if you want to like put this on a keychain or on a dog collar or whatever it is, it's just going to be, not only is it going to be bulkier and more expensive, but it's just like, it's less elegant, so you have this larger object than it could have been if it was just a keyring. The real price of it is going to be more like $50 each, depending on how you mount it and what products are actually available and good. And it kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth that this is kind of, it's one of those things that like it looks good in pictures, but it's actually, I think, a bad design.
I think people will yell at us if we don't bring this up because we haven't mentioned the umpteen other times that it'll come up. But people keep thinking that the AirPods are an example of my naked robotic core concept that we talked about with the iPhone. And to review, the idea behind that with the iPhone is make the iPhone as small as possible so that you have give the consumer the most options in terms of how they want to deal with it. If they want the smallest phone possible, then they've got it. But if they want to put a case on it, you've made the inside part as small as possible so that when you do put a case on it, it doesn't get that much bigger. And so you might think that, given what you just said about the AirTags, oh, they're the same thing. We don't even give you any case. We give you the naked robotic core and you have to dress it up in these accessories. Like, we don't do it, it's not, there's no holes in it. It's not supposed to be attached. It is literally the naked robotic core and you have to wrap it in something, or you could just have it be the way it is and loose in your bag. The problem with that, and the reason I think the AirTags are not a good example of naked robotic core, is that as far as I can tell from seeing the teardowns, I don't have these in person because I didn't buy any AirTags, but as far as I've seen from like the iFixit teardowns and stuff, AirTags are not as small as they can possibly be. They're much more like sort of before the iPhone went naked robotic core, like the iPhone 3G or iPhone 3GS. They're both the same shape, where there's a curve to the plastic so that there's basically airspace inside it so that it can look like I don't know what it's like. What candy looks like? It's like a lozenge, kind of like it has a curve to it.
Like a spree, a very big spree.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that candy, but I'll take your word for it. But like, if this was going to be a naked robotic core, it would, not that it would look more like tile, but tile, in my impression, is they tend to pull in the edges as tight as they can. So there's no unnecessary curves or bulges for the sake of aesthetics or a particular design principle. It's much more like the iPhone 4, let's say, where the outsides are sucked or the last good-looking Mazda RX-7, where the outsides are sucked in as tightly as they can possibly be to the insides to give you maximum space to adorn it if that's what you want to do. If you want it to be as small as possible, hey, we've sucked it all in for you. Here's your naked robotic core. But if you want to put something in it, we've really compacted the core as much as we can so that when you do put a case on it, it doesn't get too bulky. And I don't think that's what they've done with this, as far as I can tell. I may be wrong. Maybe there's not as much airspace in there as I think, but every time I see the curves and the things you were talking about that make it essentially hard to even, let's say, electrical tape to something because there's no flat side, really. Although you can tell me, is one side of it kind of flat or no?
No, well, it's the whole thing is like bulbous. It's all rounded. It's like it's all basically convex.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think this is not an ideal implementation of the naked robotic core. It has some aspects of it in that it's clear that they want you to put accessories on it or whatever, but yeah. And so people are drilling holes in them, which is a thing that you can do, but obviously there goes your waterproofing because you just drilled a hole for the water to get in. And I wouldn't trust that hole to stand up over stress because, it's not a designed-in, molded-in hole. You've just basically, ruptured the structural integrity of the AirPod, and now you're going to have like stress cracks and everything. So I don't recommend that. It makes me think, though, of all the things that Apple made that don't actually have any kind of convenient attach point. I was thinking of when they made a series of iPod Touches that had the little pop-out anchor point for a strap. Maybe you don't remember that because you weren't big into the iPod Touch, but I was getting iPod Touches and they had, it was flush, but if you pressed it in, it would go in a little bit and then pop out, and it was like a grommet, like it was basically just like a, I don't know how to describe it, like a cylinder with a big disc on top of it, and it would pop up and you would loop a strap around that, right? Even something like that as sort of an anchor point, not necessarily just, Tile has a hole in theirs, therefore Apple should have a hole in theirs. Apple could have done something more aptly to give an attachment point that is more minimal than what they have. So I feel your pain in attaching things. Lots of people are posting Twitter threads of like, if you buy the expensive Apple case, here's where it falls down because the key ring it comes with is one of those flat key rings, like there's lots of different ways you can do key rings, but one way you can do it is to have kind of like a flattened snake that goes around in a ring, and it makes it wider in one dimension than it is in the other. And lots of keys and other things don't fit around that, or only fit around it one way, but then can't rotate. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right. And so it makes for absurd scenarios. And also, if you look at the Apple cases, if you're looking at the AirTag head on, the ring, you'd be looking at the ring like head on as well. So you'd see the AirTag and Apple logo, and you'd see the key ring, so you could look straight through the hole. But keys, a lot of keys go onto key rings the other way, where the key is rotated sideways. So you're looking at the side of the key and then looking through the key ring hole. I'm not describing this well, but like look at your ring of keys. If you just hold your finger with the ring and let the keys dangle, usually the keys aren't facing you. They are sideways to you. But the AirTag is exactly the opposite. So it doesn't even like sort of lay flat next to your other keys because it insists on being, in the same plane as the key ring. And it's the way it attaches with that big strap doesn't let it twist at all. It's just really not particularly well thought out or particularly compact. And it's also not a very good naked robotic core. So maybe they'll revise it. Maybe the next one will be smaller. They have some time to iterate on this. It definitely looks very much like the ideal use case is putting it in a pocket of a backpack, because then you don't need anything else. You don't care that it's a little bit bulky, and it works fine. And you mentioned people putting it on their pets. I would encourage people to consider a different option if they really want something they can find their pets, because in my experience, when pets run away, they don't run away to an area where people have iPhones. They run into the woods, and there's no one with iPhones in there, and it's way out of U1 range. So if you're trying to, oh, my dog is lost, hey, I'll find it with the Find My network. No, you won't, unless it ran into a mall. Like, it's like, where is your dog running? Does your dog just run into crowds full of people with phones? No, they always run off into the woods. They're chasing a bird. They're like, you have no idea where they are. It's not the ideal thing. Even Apple says AirTag is meant to track things, not people or pets. If you want to track your pet, because I have a pet that is a flight risk, let's say, because she really loves birds and squirrels and other things and has no idea that anything else exists when she sees them. A strong prey drive, they call it. Anyway, there's the company I use is whistle.com. They're not a sponsor, but I've used their dog GPS products for a long time. The first revision was a little bit, the battery life wasn't that great, but the second one, the battery life is amazing. It's kind of big and bulky. It's way bigger than an AirTag, but the battery lasts weeks, and it is literal GPS. So no matter where your dog goes, you can, it sends a signal up to wherever, you can find your dog basically anywhere. It's not super duper great real-time tracking, but you don't have to rely on your dog running near people with iPhones, which is a big plus.
To come back around, John, I don't think you told us if you bought any Apple TVs or remotes.
I got a new Apple TV. Yes, of course, the big one, to replace my existing Apple TV 4K downstairs. And the existing Apple TV 4K will bump up to the bedroom, kicking out our old Apple TV HD. And then I got a spare remote, so I don't ever have to use that stupid Siri remote ever again. So I got exactly the same stuff as Marco, and I'm basically following the same plan.
Good deal. All right, we need to talk about FileVault performance. And some people had pointed out that the SSD in computers that have the Apple T2 security chip is encrypted. So you can turn on FileVault so that your Mac requires a password to decrypt your data. But it's going to be encrypted no matter what. Yeah,
we mentioned that in the last show, but it's just good. We'll link to the tech support article. Rather than just going by what you've heard in our reckons last time. Oh, I think there's things with T2 or the M1 do this or whatever. Here's an Apple support document that spells it out. iPhones and iOS devices have been encrypted maybe since the beginning, but certainly for many, many, many years, right? And so the M1 Macs and the Macs based on the ARM chips and the, iPhone-ish architecture, of course, do the same thing. But even before that, once the Macs got the T2 chip, they would basically just encrypt everything by default. Now, it being encrypted on the SSD is one thing, and you maybe think, well, then what does turning FileVault on and off do? And as this article says, what it does is it means that to decrypt it, now you have to enter a password for one of your user accounts to decrypt it. Whereas before, the decryption keys presumably are in the secure enclave and it didn't demand anything of you, right? You could just, it was encrypted, but it didn't say, hey, before I can even boot, please enter your password. It would just pull its own password out of the secure enclave and go to town. So this was with respect to, worrying about performance. You have no choice if you have a T2 or an M1 Mac. Whatever the performance hit is or isn't, and I think there is basically none because it's all just done transparently in hardware at full speed, you're paying that price no matter what. So your only choice is, hey, do I want it to require me to enter one of my passwords before it will decrypt?
Indeed. Then related, Michael Bertle wrote that I have 2 Mac Minis in remote locations running headless. I access them via VNC over an SSH tunnel. In this setup, I need to have FileVault disabled. If I perform an OS update remotely, that requires a restart, and FileVault requires the input of a password before I'm able to connect via VNC. Just something to consider if you ever plan on servicing a Mac remotely without access to a physical keyboard.
A bunch of people brought this in. I have this vague notion that there is some way around this somehow, but I don't actually know what it is. But it seems like a lot of people have run into this problem that, yeah, if you do make it require your password and then you reboot and you're not there to enter your password, at the point that it demands your password, it's like it needs it to get to the disk so it can boot. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to VNC in and enter my password, no, you're not, because the thing isn't even booted yet. Like I said, I think there might be some workarounds for this somehow, but just keep it in mind if you don't know the workarounds, like I don't, and you enable FileVault and you want to remotely control your computer through a reboot, you may have a problem.
So now we turn into, please, Apple, please fix my particular bug corner. And this time I'm not the winner. John, what's going on with your Mac, buddy?
I don't think that, I'm not really asking them to, I mean, they should fix it if it's a thing, but I just thought I'd bring this up because it's interesting. It's one of the aspects of owning a computer that lots of people don't own, that people maybe don't think about. And I've always had these really weird computers that are, expensive and obscure that most people don't buy and probably shouldn't buy. And so I have experience with this, right? So recently macOS 11.3 came out, and as soon as I did the update, I started experiencing a bug on my Mac, right? And the bug was that the display would not wake from sleep, right? And it's not that the computer wouldn't wake from sleep; the display wouldn't. So I have my things, my energy saver set up as like screensaver goes on after 5 minutes, and then after 15 minutes, the display goes to sleep. And so when the display goes to sleep, you are seeing your screensaver, then all of a sudden the display turns black, right? The way it's supposed to work is you come up to your computer and you whack the space bar, click the mouse button or something, and the display springs back to life, right? During this time, the computer hasn't yet fallen asleep because the computer sleep timer is different and much longer. And you can confirm this, by just going to another Mac and SSHing in and say, yep, here I am. I'm on this Mac. The Mac is totally awake. It's running. I'm SSHing into it. I can do stuff. But no matter what I do, the display won't wake. I can type as much as I want on the keyboard. I can click the mouse button. I can tap the power button on the computer. The display just stays asleep. And so when something like this happens, and it started happening immediately after 11.3 and has happened multiple times since, so I'm pretty sure it's the 11.3 update, you think, oh, this is a bug. And you might be thinking, well, this happens so immediately and so many people's Macs go to sleep. Surely this has been reported 1,000 times already and this will be fixed quickly. But then you remember, nobody, to a first approximation, has my computer set up. Who has a Mac Pro with the Pro Display XDR? Probably nobody is reporting this. In fact, for all I know, the other 8 people in the world who have a Mac Pro and a Pro Display XDR have their display set to never sleep because it's some sort of professional lab situation where it's just always being used or something, or who knows, right? But I did my duty as a good, Apple reporter, and I filed the feedback. And what I did was, like, one of the times that it happened, I SSH'd into the computer from elsewhere, and I ran a sysdiagnose, and I ran a spin dump, and I saved the files, and then I made a feedback. Number will be in the show notes, FB9095615. And I said, here's what's happening. I have no idea how to reproduce it. It doesn't happen every single time, but it's happened a bunch of times. I'm pretty sure it's 11.3. Here's a spin dump. Here's a sysdiagnose. Fingers crossed. But all of this is just to say, if you dream of having, let's say, an exotic car or a fancy computer, be aware that when you have problems, A, nobody cares, and B, you and only like 5 other people in the world have even a chance of having that problem. So if you buy one of the new iMacs and something like this comes out, thousands of other people are going to report it and it will probably get fixed. But all I can do is just hope that it somehow magically goes away in a future update. I have updated to 11.3.1 and haven't seen it happen since, but I updated like 2 hours ago. So I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
Fun times. All right, there's been an update with regard to the new 13-inch iPad and the old Magic Keyboard. Jason Snell had speculated on upgrade this week or last that the new iPad Pro would probably fit in the old Magic Keyboard case. It might just be a bit too snug by Apple standards, and turns out that he was right. And yes, you can use the new 12.9-inch iPad Pro in the old Magic Keyboard. It's just that the tolerances are a little tight and it's not going to be flawless, and Apple isn't keen on that, but it will work.
It's like when you try to put on your skinny jeans after a long winter of fattening up. You can pretty much get them on and snap them, but you can kind of tell it's not fitting the way it's supposed to.
You know about this, John? Is this something you have experience with?
I do, yeah.
Oh, my God.
How skinny are your jeans?
Yeah, just wait. What is it? Like after a certain age, you say you gain a pound a year for the rest of your life?
Let me introduce you to the world of stretch jeans.
Yeah, no, I don't have any of those yet.
Oh, you're missing out. Oh,
I mean, not that I
man.
wear jeans anymore anyway. I just wear sweatpants all the time, so it's not really an issue.
I've been fully converted to stretch jeans. I'll tell you what, that's not a sponsor, but like the Banana Republic Traveler line. Oh my God, so good.
Oh, my word.
The Middle-Aged Men podcast. Get some stretch jeans.
I'm telling you, you feel like you're getting away with something because like they look normal. They look totally normal, and you're like, I can't believe how incredibly comfortable this is. And like, because they feel almost like sweatpants, but with much more functional pockets because you don't have like the phone sliding out problem that you do with sweatpants. And you can go outside and like go out places and stuff, and you look normal.
Speaking of Jason Snell, and speaking of being a middle-aged man, if you're interested in the Tesla Model 3, then Snell borrowed one, and I thought it was worth, if you're willing and interested, listening to this review that Jason did on Upgrade Plus, which is there for pay-only after shows. So you will have to be a member to hear it. But on episode 351, Jason had recounted a trip from San Francisco to Arizona, I think, in a Model 3. And yeah, it was really, really interesting to hear someone who is not that into cars, but very into technology talk about it. One of the most striking things that he said was that he felt like he was more aware of his speed in terms of like miles per hour in the Tesla, the Model 3 with only the center mounted display, no gauge cluster of any sort, than he is in his, old traditional minivan. And I thought that was fascinating. He was saying that, because on the minivan, you have to look at where the needle is and find what the nearest number is and then figure out exactly where in between the two nearest numbers are, to get your exact miles per hour, that it was more effort and for him to figure out his speed in the minivan than just looking at this screen that's a little bit out of your direct line of sight and looking in the corner to see the numeral. I've driven a Model 3 and I did not personally get this experience, but I also only have driven Model 3s for like 10, 15 miles at a time, not 2,000 or whatever it was that he did. So if you're a member of Upgrade Plus or whatever they call their membership, I definitely suggest you try out or take a listen to episode 351 and the after show from that.
Sounds like he just wants a digital Speedo. I mean,
yeah,
I
exactly.
remember those coming out when I was a kid on like Cadillacs and stuff. Like, yeah, if you want to read a digital watch instead of an analog one, we can put that number in front of you and it'll be much bigger than it is on a corner of the Model 3 screen. But
yep,
Took me a second to realize what a digital Speedo meant.
yeah.
But I got it.
I also thought it was fascinating. He was saying that his wife Lauren wears reading glasses, and apparently there is no, or according as far as he knew, there was no affordance for increasing the size of the font in any of the display stuff on the Tesla, which was not that surprising, but also deeply disappointing.
Yeah, they did a software update last fall, I think it was, where they made the font size way too small. And it was just like one day, like I went to my car and like the PRND indicator, like a bunch of other stuff was just really tiny. And it seemed like they had designed the UI for the Model 3 and just kind of shoved it into the S screen, but it was really bad. And they had to revert that, I mean, a couple of weeks later maybe, but it kind of gave me a bad taste in my mouth. Like, wow, Tesla can at any time make my car significantly worse if they want to or if they accidentally do. And there's not really anything I can do about that. We are sponsored this week by ExpressVPN. Have you ever browsed in incognito mode? It's probably not as incognito as you think. And why would it be? Incognito mode, like the Chrome browser itself, is a Google product, and Google has made its fortune by tracking your movements online. There's even a $5 billion class action lawsuit against them in California, where it's accused of secretly collecting user data. Google's defense was, quote, incognito does not mean invisible. So how do you actually make yourself as invisible as possible online? ExpressVPN. Because it turns out that even in incognito mode, your online activity still gets tracked, and data brokers still get to buy and sell your data just using your IP address. Data harvesters use your IP to uniquely identify you and your location. But with ExpressVPN, your connection gets rerouted through their encrypted server, and your IP address is masked. ExpressVPN's IP address is what they see, not yours. Every time you connect to ExpressVPN, you get a random IP address shared by many other ExpressVPN customers. That makes it harder for third parties to identify you or harvest your data. And ExpressVPN is super easy to use. No matter what device you're on, phone, laptop, even a smart TV, all you have to do is tap one button for instant protection. So if you really want to go incognito and protect your privacy, secure yourself with the #1 rated VPN. Visit expressvpn.com/ATP and get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/ATP. One more time, expressvpn.com/ATP. Thank you so much to ExpressVPN for sponsoring our show.
Okay, so I think it was right before we released or really recorded last episode, there was quite the brouhaha about Basecamp. And oh man, there's so much here, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to summarize it very quickly, but to establish a little bit of basic foundation. First of all, Basecamp has sponsored in the past. They haven't sponsored terribly recently, and they are not currently booked to sponsor in the future. And they definitely have sponsored in the past. But Basecamp is the company behind the Basecamp software, as well as Hey, the new-ish email service. And about a week ago, or maybe a little more, I think it was Jason Fried wrote a post on their kind of blogging platform that's powered off of Hey, saying that there's going to be a new company's policy, Jason Fried being their CEO, there's a new company's policy saying that it will be no more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account. It's probably worth noting here that is not the original verbiage, but that's what it got changed to. And a lot of people got really up in arms about this, which is somewhat interesting because Basecamp is not a big company. It was only about 60 people, but the internet needed a main character, and Basecamp and Jason Fried and David Hannemeyer Hansen, they became the main characters for last week. And a lot of people got really upset. And it seemed like there was more to this than meets the eye. And there is so much more to this than I think we can reasonably cover or even really reasonably summarize during the course of the show. But it made all of us kind of wonder, what are the bigger implications about what went on? And to build a little more about what went on, a lot of people got really upset about this, no more politics at work. And I think a lot of the employees at Basecamp said, well, hold on, that's not really fair. And then it came to light that a lot of the genesis of this was from a list that had been started many, many years back about funny sounding names of clients of theirs. And it's not terribly clear how much of that was something like Seymour Butts or how much of that was something that was kind of racially motivated. But a lot of people at Basecamp got really uncomfortable about it. This at the same time as while they're doing diversity, equality. What's DEI? I'm drawing a blank now.
Diversity, equity, inclusion? I'm going to go with.
There you go. Thank you.
That's right. That's close, though.
I think that's right. It's something like that. There was like a third of the company was in a DEI committee trying to make things better as this is all going on. And I think that might have been the genesis of discovering this particular list. And the list was brought to the attention of Jason and David. And, it's hard to say what exactly happened, but basically they kind of shrugged it off at first, and that just escalated things even more. And I don't know, I really, really strongly encourage you, if you have the time and the willingness to read a little bit, to read the 2 pieces by Casey Newton. I believe both of them were at The Verge. We'll put them in the show notes. It's also worth reading the actual stuff that David and Jason said on their various, I guess, kind of sort of blogs. There's so much here, and I'm going to give you 2 a chance to add any other relevant summary if you'd like. But truly, you're hearing me, the chief summarizer in chief, doing at best a passable job of summarizing this, and I am deliberately leaving out a lot because we would be here for an hour if I don't. So that's kind of where things started. And again, please read the other Casey's articles, and feel free to pause the show now to do so. But like I was saying earlier, it really makes people wonder, what is the role of politics in the workforce? What is the role of executives with regard to setting rules and culture? Was this right? Was this wrong? Was it that their edict of no politics in the workplace was right, but the way they handled it was wrong? who really knows? And we're certainly going to talk about it here in a second. But what we do know is by the end of last week, or perhaps the beginning of this week, Basecamp had said in a very Basecampy way, look, if you want to leave Basecamp, if you're an employee and you would like to leave, we'll give you something to the order of 6 months severance and no questions asked. You can walk. We'll give you 6 months pay, and we'll, do what we can to help you land another job, which is cool. And supposedly about a third of the company did that. They walked away, including, from what I understand, the entire iOS team, for example. So there's a lot here. I don't know which of you would like to start. Maybe Marco, are there any other points that I'm skipping that are salient with regard to the summary? And then feel free to dig in if not.
Honestly, I have not followed the story that closely. I had a bunch of stuff happening in real life, nothing bad, just a very busy couple of weeks. And so I missed most of this. I have read some of kind of the summary articles, but it's hard for me to speak about this because not only is it a little uncomfortable because I don't want to offend people or say the wrong thing or say something that I don't mean, just out of my clumsiness with using the language and speaking that I'm not particularly solid at. So there's all that factoring in here. But on the basic question of whether political speech at work should be allowed. And again, with the massive disclaimer that I've never managed people, I should never manage people, and I don't know what it's like to manage people. But with that all said, I think the idea that you shouldn't allow, quote, political speech in a workplace, however you define that, which is its own massive can of worms, but the idea that you shouldn't allow that only makes sense in a perfect world that is not our world that we live in. The idea that you would not allow, quote, political speech presumes a lot about the equality of the world you're in, whether anybody is oppressed or there's so many presumptions and of privilege and of equality in that kind of point of view. In reality, the world is messier than that. And in reality, you have to talk politics sometimes because the world is not right. Not talking about it really just enables the status quo to continue. And so the status quo has to be really damn good for everybody for that to make sense. And that's never really the case anywhere in the world ever. So I think it's one of those ideas that, a lot of tech people have really kind of simplistic, systematic views of the world of here's how things should work because this is how they work logically in my head and in my computer programs. And the world is messier than that. The world is way messier than that. And I don't think we're ever going to be at a point where equality is so great and widespread and universal that we will be able to have the privilege to say we don't need to talk about politics in the workplace. That's not reality. That will never happen. And as long as the world has any inequality whatsoever, the idea of trying to limit speech in a workplace to not include, quote, politics, again, whatever that means, I think it's a fantasy. And the real world is not like that. And by enabling, or rather by forcing silence on certain topics as a policy, what you really do is enable the current ruling class, whatever that is, and you significantly disadvantage any kind of marginalized group or any kind of marginalized cause. And that's never going to work. That's never going to be a right and just and justified outcome. I don't know the people who run this company. I have no idea what their motivations are or aren't, but I don't believe that these are fundamentally evil people. I haven't read up on it. I don't know. I don't think they are. I think this was just a really badly made decision and a series of very badly handled problems from what I've read. But again, that's very little. So I'll let John talk about the details much better than I could and the issue much better than I could. But yeah, my point of view on this basically is, again, from my very limited reading of it, that the whole idea of politics at work, of trying to pretend like you can just not talk about that and everything will be fine, that's a fantasy.
So when these things blow up on Twitter, we're all kind of probably have some form of trauma from the past 4 years, at least in the U.S. anyway. But for the Twitter dramas that are essentially lower stakes, like this is one small tech company. It looms large in our particular nerd world, but I bet most people have never heard of it. When there's lower stakes like that and you're more distant from it, maybe your inclination is like, oh, well, then I don't have to pay attention to it. It's not a big deal, like, or whatever. But I think it's useful when something blows up like this that you do have distance from, that it's not really about you. It's not really about anyone you know, and it's not really about anything of consequence. It's just, one little company. There's always something in every one of these controversies. There's always something to be learned. And the more you're able to look at it from a distance, the more you're able to incorporate that new knowledge into yourself without any kind of like personal threat or identity threat or whatever, right? Because I bet most people listening to this don't have any particular stake in Basecamp. And it's, like I said, in the grand scheme of things, it's not Facebook or Apple. It's a 60-person company, or was a 60-person company, right? And so that's the first thing I'll say about this is take the opportunity, if you are a person who follows Twitter or follows any kind of tech news, that when one of these things happen and when it seems like there's a lot of like strife and drama about some decision, take that opportunity to see, is there anything I, as a basically detached observer, can learn from what has happened here? And there almost always is. Sometimes there's multiple things to learn from different angles. Like, it depends on the controversy, but sometimes in a controversy, especially when it's like super low stakes where people are like arguing about superheroes or something, it's like, who cares? You can put yourself in the position of all sides of the debate and say, okay, well, if I was in this position, here's what I would have learned from this thing. And if I was in this position, here's what I would have learned. If I was in this position, here's what can be learned, right? And this is a great example of that in all measures. It's not as low stakes as superheroes, but in the grand scheme of things, most of us, we're not Basecamp employees. To just give a little bit of background, if you haven't even heard of Basecamp, the company in our, sort of not Mac nerd circles, but sort of tech enthusiasts with tastes kind of circles, they're known for making sort of products that appeal to the nerds. They have nice user interface. They look nice. And they're also known for creating a company, Basecamp, it was really originally called 37 Signals, that runs counter to a lot of the conventional wisdom about how companies should be run in a way that would be appealing to the founders. Like, they made a company, it's the type of place that they would want to work. They wrote a lot of books about it. I think at least one was like a New York Times bestseller that says, look, you can run a company like this and it's better. Things like, hey, you don't have to grow at the maximum possible rate. It's okay to get a company that is merely sustainably profitable. You don't have to run your employees ragged. You don't have to accept VC money. And, people would run at them and say, like, look, what you have, you've left millions of dollars of value on the table by not pursuing growth at all costs. And they would say, that's just not what we want to do. And this is a perfectly valid choice. You can have a company that, treats its employees with more respect than your typical company. You can give them perks that most companies wouldn't give them, even though you lose money on them. And like, you don't have to require your employees to answer your emails on weekends. And it's all sort of stuff that feels good to you. If you look at the founders and where they're coming from, they say, it seems to me that they tried to make a company that is a place that they would want to work. And that's one of the things that they're famous for, in addition to their products, which are, well made and appealing. And of course, David Heinemeier Hansson created Ruby on Rails. So there's a whole other technical side of things where the technology stack they work on is itself famous, and also famous for reasons that are related to the stuff that I just said. Ruby on Rails is convention over configuration, and it's aesthetically nice, and it's simple, and it's user-friendly, and it has lots of affordances for getting set up and running. And, it all kind of fits together in that, if you look at their products, their books, their technology, it makes sense together, right? And everything about it sounds good. And, a lot of people are having a lot of making fun of this, like, oh, these are the people who are writing books about telling us how we're supposed to run a company for the past umpteen years, and they just lost a third of their employees. So, haha, I guess all those ideas you had must have been terrible because you obviously have no idea what you're doing. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think this particular controversy goes to show that like what they've been able to do with their products, with their books, even with their technology stack, they've been able to do because of their decisions to not accept VC, to maintain control over the company, to not have a big hierarchy, to keep the company small. And that means that the two people, the co-founders, are able to essentially do whatever they want. Like, it's their company, they control it. They don't have to answer to a board of directors. They don't have to run their decisions by a committee. If they think something is a good idea, they can just do it. That kind of individual control produces many great things. Lots of great works of art, great video games, small companies, startups that are powered and driven by the decision of a small number of individuals, and that allows them to do things that the big companies can't do or won't do or are against conventional wisdom. What that also means is whatever foibles, flaws, or blind spots those two individual people who are in control of everything have, those also get a chance to be executed immediately, unequivocally. And if it turned out to be the wrong decision, that's the downside of having the control embodied in a very small number of people who answer to nobody. And it seems kind of amazing to me that 37 Signal / Basecamp has gone on this long without the blind spots of the founders manifesting in the way they just did. So that I think is an important lesson of like, oh, if only it was just me in charge of everything and I didn't have to run everything through this organization, everything would be great and I would make all the right decisions. Like, there is a buffering effect of having more opinions and not having absolute control. I wouldn't, promote the idea of giving VCs control, but like that. So that's one lesson that I take away from this. The next thing is what was their problem? What's their blind spot? Like, what did they do wrong? Like, and part of one of the things you can learn from this controversy is, from the outside, we didn't know anything initially. We just said this policy land. Here's our new policy. It had a bunch of other stuff in the policy, which is other new policies that are, you look at it and say, oh, I can kind of understand that. Or that seems weird. Like, instead of giving you benefits, they were just going to give you the cash for those benefits so you can decide what you want. But it was like, well, but maybe what if they get a group discount, and will they always give us the cash? And is the cash really equivalent to what they're taking away? And what's the point of this? Getting rid of committees, which sounds like, oh, well, I mean, committees, like, who likes committees? But on the other hand, does that mean just like it's just, with the committees, we were doing useful things. So why are the committees? And one of the committees they're getting rid of was the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So that seems maybe not great. But the one that everyone focused on was the one we just read. No more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account, which I think said no more societal or political discussions at work originally or something like that. And as soon as that, that particular point is when it landed on Twitter, one particular group of people saw that and immediately said, warning, warning, danger. This is not good. This is not a good decision. And a much larger probably group of people said, what's the big deal? It sounds fine to me. Like, you don't want people arguing about politics all day at your work. Like, this is a perfectly rational decision, right? Another thing you can learn from this controversy is, why did those two groups of people have such different reactions to this rule? One group thought it was like, whatever. I can kind of understand where they're coming from. Seems kind of weird, but who cares? And the other group was like, this is the wrongest thing you could possibly say. You have totally lost track of what you're doing. Do not do this. Understanding both of those positions is important to understanding what they did wrong. I was in the camp of when I saw this and I said, oh no, no, you've done something very bad here. My initial thing was like, they've done something so bad that they're going to have to walk this back.
Yep.
Right. Like that they're just going to have to. It turns out that they stuck with it long enough for a third of their company to quit, and then posted a thing which is like, looks like we made a mistake. I was like, you think? Do you think you made a mistake? And they didn't spell out the mistake they made. So it's not entirely clear they understand it fully yet, but I think all observers would agree, unless that third of the employees that left your company were employees that you wanted to leave your company, which it doesn't seem like it was, because it was super senior people, and a lot of them had been there for a long time. And I have a feeling that Basecamp did not hire a lot of people who were terrible employees and didn't retain people who were terrible employees. So probably you didn't want those people to leave. So you can't even say, oh, well, people left, but only the bad ones. And so you can kind of say, whatever you did, it didn't work the way you thought it was going to work, and it's bad. And then you got to figure out what it was. And again, all the people who said this is a bad idea and this is terrible understood something that the founders didn't, right? And without digging into too much, and Marco more or less landed on it, like as the details came out, I don't want to dig more into the details. We'll put tons and tons of links so you can read about what it is. But like, the founders who have complete control of policy don't set a policy like this unless something has happened and they're like, okay, well, I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm just going to make a blanket rule so that we never have to deal with this again. Let's just not bring it up again. Let's just not talk about it, which anyone who's ever been in a relationship knows is not the solution to any kind of serious problem that you're having. And these problems are hard, but it's essentially a failure of leadership of saying, we don't know what to do. It seems like whatever we do, nobody is happy. So we're just not going to talk about it anymore. And as Marco points out, you've essentially made a decision and picked a side at that point, whether you know it or not, because not talking about it is a tacit endorsement of the status quo and yada yada. And then people will be asking themselves, well, so what the hell's wrong with the status quo? And why should people be arguing about stuff at work? And I still don't understand. And that brings me to another thing that you can learn by looking at a lot of these controversies is like, inevitably someone will bring up the word woke, which gets thrown around as kind of an insult these days. But it's, I think, one of the more recent sort of, in the past, decade or so, vocabulary words that has come into use that is actually extremely appropriate, because the reason people had such differing views of this rule has to do with how awakened certain people are to things that other people are not yet awakened to. And that sounds profound. It's like, oh, we know the truth and you don't, and blah, blah. It's not that at all, right? It's just that, like, I'm sure as you live longer, you will experience this eventually of like becoming aware of something that you hadn't really thought much about before, right? And this is something that I think all three of us can personally speak to as an experience of awakening to issues that previously were not on your radar at all. If I think back to my teenage self and how aware I was of many, many of the issues that fall under the umbrella of like current modern day wokeness, I had no awareness of them whatsoever, or the awareness I had was so surface level and I was on the complete opposite side of it that I might as well not have understood its existence, right? Think of something simple like, does sexism exist? How are girls treated differently than boys in school? How are men treated differently than women in society? Maybe intellectually I could have given lip service to something or other, but I had no idea. I had not yet awakened to that profound reality, and it took years, embarrassingly long, and years and years and years of my age to eventually me to awaken the fact that, oh, life is actually different if you're a woman in America than if you're a man. And not just different in like a way that we fixed in the 60s and we never have to worry about again, but like profoundly different, right? I don't know what it's like to experience that, but I do know what it's like to be awakened to the idea that there is something that you didn't understand before that you do now. Multiply that by a million different issues that we all potentially are unaware of now, but could through experience or hearing other people talk about it, or just, the passage of time and through our thick skulls, become awakened to things. And it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to express, because if I could go back in time and talk to my teenage self and try to explain it, my teenage self would dismiss me and say, you're an idiot, go away. I already understand this. You're stupid. Everything you're saying is dumb. And that doesn't make any sense. And that's not actually true.
I mean, isn't that everyone's teenage selves?
Right. But like that's the difficulty we face here, right? So anytime there's anything like this where the quote unquote woke people see this and understand the underlying issues of sort of marginalization and oppression in the workplace, in the sort of subtle modern incarnation where there's no one trying to do anything particularly evil and everyone is trying to do the right thing. But because, let's say, I mean, this is the hypothetical, I don't know, the founders, whatever, but let's say the founders of this company tried to make a company that they would want to work at. Maybe they did. Maybe they successfully made a company that they would want to work at, but they are two rich white dudes. And making a company that they want to work at isn't necessarily the same company that someone who doesn't share their life experiences would also want to work at, right? And, I don't want to dig too far. I don't know. Like the details of the Basecamp thing are immaterial, but it's clear that the founders, I'm not going to say they didn't fully understand the perspective of the employees who were on, who were trying to, who were on the DEI committee and who were railing against the list of names and had specific grievances. And, so here's the thing about this. One more thing to learn, right? The founders all agreed that the list was bad. Everyone agreed the list was bad. We're going to get rid of it. It's bad that we have this list. It's not like they were saying the list is fine. I don't know what you're worried about. They weren't saying that at all. They were like, yes, we should never have done this. The founders didn't make the list. That they became aware of it and they said, this is not how we do things here at Basecamp. We're not going to have a list making fun of our customers' names. It's bad for multiple reasons. We're getting rid of it. It's not like there was a debate about that, right? But they managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by when pressed and saying, okay, and not only is this list bad, but also, hey, if you're, I don't know the details here, but let's say they had an employee who was an Asian American and said, there's no Asian American probably alive today who's an adult who did not have their name made fun of or their imagined name made fun of when they were a kid, right? And maybe that's a thing intellectually. But if you haven't grown up having sort of people make fun of your name in that way that they can make fun of Asian names or calling you things that aren't your actual name, but it's fun to call you when you're in elementary school, having a list of names at work that people are making fun of has a different effect on you as making the workplace feel like a safe place where you belong and where, you don't have to worry about things like that coming up. And you might say, well, that's not a big deal. Who cares? Your name's not on the list. What are you even worried about, right? Not understanding the sort of continuum of like, okay, well, making fun of my name, that's not a big deal, all the way up to like, people attacking Asian Americans with cinder blocks in San Francisco, the latest story I read or whatever, right? Those two things aren't connected at all, which is something that some of the founders actually said. It's like, I can see where you come from. The list is bad. We should get rid of the list, but come on. Like, it's not the same thing as like attacking Asian Americans on the street. Like, this is not, there's no connection between those two things. And the thing is, there is a connection. It is a long, circuitous connection, but you can travel it and you can find it, and they do eventually connect. And like the founders push back on trying to sort of draw the bigger picture, someone who is aware of the bigger picture because they live it, trying to show that bigger picture to the founders, caused the founders to push back against that. Again, even though everyone agrees list is bad, we're getting rid of it, there's not a thing that we do at this company, they disagreed about particularly why we don't do it and what it means in the bigger picture. And so their reaction was, you know what? We tried this and no one's happy. We told you we're getting rid of the list. Some people think that getting rid of the list is bad. And we said we're getting rid of the list. And the people who agree with us said, well, but you don't understand why. You're not getting rid of the list for the reasons that are the exact same reasons that we think you should. And you don't understand the bigger picture. So now we're angry at you. So you know what? No politics at work.
Problem solved.
And that was not the right decision to make. But it stems from the collective blind spot that the founders had to, like, they didn't really know what they were dealing with. And I'm not saying these issues are easy to deal with. Like, few people are equipped to deal with this on their own, which is part of why you get a DEI committee, which is part of why you diversify your workforce. In fact, I feel like, again, I'm speculating here, but it feels like Basecamp has made an effort over the past few years to try to diversify its workforce. And that's kind of like, the pipeline problem with like women in tech or whatever. Oh, the solution is let's just hire more women. That's not the solution if you're hiring women into an environment that is hostile to women. All you're doing is like throwing them into a threshing machine and saying, we hired you, the problem is solved. And they're like, well, but here we are, and there's some things we should change about your company because now that we're here, we see it's not particularly great to be a woman here, so let's change some stuff, right? So it is plausible, I don't know if this to be true, but it is plausible that Basecamp made an effort to diversify its hiring because its founders are good people and want to do that. And they successfully diversified their hiring. And those diverse employees said, we think we should make some changes around here and let's form a committee to, once you get employees with different perspectives and different points of view, they necessarily will have things that they want to improve to make the working environment better for everybody, not just for the people who are already there. And when that happens, there is going to be, I'm not going to say a power struggle, but like the phrase they use these days is renegotiating the social contract. And that happens on levels very small and very large. And even just at the level in an individual company, if you hire a bunch of employees from diverse backgrounds, they're the ones who are going to find that list and say, you know what? It's not great that this list exists, making fun of people's names. Whereas it had existed for years and apparently it wasn't a big deal. But now you hire some new employees and they say, hey, we probably shouldn't do this. And to the founders' credit, they say, you know what? Now that you've shown us this list, we agree. This is crappy. We shouldn't do this. But then the debate that ensues about why it's crappy reveals that the founders don't really have the bigger picture that these other employees do, because they don't have the life experiences, and they're also not experienced enough to know how to navigate this very difficult issue. And they don't have a bunch of committees or a board helping sort of buffer their decisions to try to figure out how we can navigate this. They just try to do the best they can as two individuals. They are not equipped to deal with this. They make the wrong decision, and a third of the company leaves. And you look at the third of the company leaving, you're like, oh, these people are all overreacting. What were they, what are they so mad about? What actually happened isn't that big of a deal. And the founders agreed the list was bad, and they're just, because they're not woke enough, you have to leave the company. And one maybe final thing. One final thing you can learn here is, well, ask the people. Ask someone who left, why did you leave? Why was it important enough for you to leave the company? Like, look at what they have to say on Twitter, read their blog posts, see where they're coming from, try to understand their perspective, right? And that can help you maybe sort of not file people away as these are the villains and these are the heroes and these are the overreactors and these are the people who are doing the right thing or the smart thing or whatever. From all sides of this, there is something to learn about, how people can make mistakes, how people can be blind to their mistakes, how something that's small to one person can be big to another, and how doing anything to upset the status quo, whether it is diversifying hiring practices or forming a DEI committee or, changing something about a workplace as simple as a list of customer names that we all agree is bad, that we shouldn't be laughing at work, that we all agree we should get rid of, how that can turn into something that destroys a third of the company, right? Lots and lots to learn here. And none of it has to, none of it is about like demonizing people or taking revenge against people or being thrilled that the people who wrote a bunch of management books about how to run a company have gotten their comeuppance because now it shows, they didn't know how to run a company after all. I think they know a lot about running a great company, but we found a blind spot and they made the wrong call and they are suffering the consequences from it. And I think and hope that they will learn something from this. I think, everyone involved is learning a hard lesson, and I hope observers will learn something from this. That, though this may be your first instinct and though it may be your instinct to stick to your guns, this is not actually the solution to the problems that were identified. And, the details are going to be different in every single situation. But the idea that we are going to, change the status quo in any way to make marginalized people ever so slightly less marginalized in ever so narrowly defined situations, that will necessarily have ramifications for everybody, not just for the marginalized people, right? If you want to make room for people at the table, it means you just can't continue to sit exactly where you are and do the same thing all the time. Making room means making room. And that's always difficult.
Yeah, I think the thing that really bothered me about it is not the thing, but one of the things that bothered me about it was that, this whole no politics in the workplace thing was obviously not a great idea. And people very quickly jumped on it and tried to say, hey, this is not a great idea. And it's not quite that cut and dry. And if you look at, and we have all these links in the show notes, that was announced in a post that Jason Fried wrote called Changes at Basecamp. And everyone pretty quickly was like, whoa, that's not so great. Not loving that. There were 5 posts that followed. The 5th was a kind of mealy-mouthed half apology-ish, maybe. It was more
it wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement that they had made a mistake. They didn't go into explaining, here's the mistake that we made, so it's not clear whether they fully understand it yet. But, they're part of their MO. Like a lot of people ask, why do they do this publicly? Part of the way this company has always worked is they do things boldly and in public and whenever they come to mind. So their last post of saying, we made a mistake and we've got a lot of learning to do, didn't go into more detail, but I'm sure this won't be the last post on this topic, right? So I do hope that they are talking to people and soul searching and figuring out exactly what happened, but to expect them to suddenly figure it all out immediately is asking a lot. And I think they have a road to continue to travel to truly understand exactly what just happened.
Right, exactly. And I think the thing that I find so gross, one of the things I find so gross about it is, when from all the reporting, particularly that Casey Newton has done, when they were called out internally, like, hey, this ain't right, the list ain't right, this ain't right. There were times they agreed, but then when they were still challenged, they didn't seem to have any particular appetite to understand why. And it was like you said, John, they said, oh, well, if nobody seems to be happy, well, screw it. No politics, problem solved. All right, let's move on to the next thing.
They understood what they understood some things that were wrong with it. Things that were within the realm of their understanding were, hey, it's not good to make fun of your customers because that's rude. And it's private customer information that we shouldn't be passing around anyway. So it's an invasion of privacy, right? Those two reasons they got, which are both true, right? But I think it was particular Hennemeyer Hansen, like when pressed on, like, oh, and by the way, there's also a racial and oppression aspect of this. Said, get out of here.
Right.
That's not
exactly.
that's not a big deal. That's not a big because that was outside their experience and understanding that they hadn't yet awoken to what that reality is like for some people who are not them. And hadn't internalized it. Again, the same way that I had not internalized sexism when I was a teenager, even though intellectually I could say something about it. But if pressed on a specific issue, oh, that's not sexism. That's something else. There's no connection, right? I've been there. We've all been there before we have understood whatever the issue may be. And the fact that they couldn't make that connection, like, I don't, who knows what else went on. I don't want to speculate. This could have been one of 17 different incidents. Like whatever was going on internally, again, I defer to ask the people who left why they left, and they'll explain it to you in their own words. They're in a much better position than I do. But that's why this looks so weird from the outside. But it's like, maybe that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe that was just revelatory to enough people to say, look, like when the rule came down, like, we give up. We can't seem to make these founders understand what we're trying to tell them. And they disbanded the DEI committee and they say we can't talk about politics at work. So whatever hope we had for them figuring out is lost. And it's not so much about this one particular incident in exchange. It's just the accumulation of offense. Because, in the end, something more profound has to happen than this one instance for a third of your company to leave, right? Especially people who've been there for years and years, senior people, entire teams, like, this is obviously a bigger issue than the details that we have, access to now. But it only takes, everyone has their sort of breaking point or their giving up point of saying, well, I don't see this going any better. And as someone pointed out in the chat, in the update post, it doesn't say yet, as far as I can tell, that they're changing the policy. They just are recognizing that they made a mistake. And it's not clear to me that they understand what that mistake was yet or how it connects to the rule they made or anything like that. But I'm hoping they will come around to it eventually.
No, but it's worth reading this first paragraph in an update, which, as we record, was posted yesterday. This is from Jason Fried. And again, I will read this verbatim, the first paragraph. Last week was terrible. We started with policy changes that felt simple, reasonable, and principled, and it blew things up internally in ways we never anticipated. David and I completely own the consequences, and we're sorry. We have a lot to learn and reflect on, and we will. The new policies stand, but we have some refining and clarifying to do. That is the entirety of the first paragraph.
Yeah. And so like they're saying the policies stand, but they're refining and clarifying. Hopefully their learning and reflecting will lead them to understand that refining and clarifying is not going to solve this problem. But, let's put it another way. This is not the ideal learning environment for you as a company founder and CEO. Like, this is not the way you want to learn these lessons in public, in incredibly dramatic fashion, in a way that is very bad for your established self-image as people who tell other people how to run a company, right? It's not the ideal scenario for you to learn. And so it's probably harder for them to be receptive to these broader ideas. And from my personal experience, I've had to be exposed to information, experiences, the experiences of others, personal stories, reading on it for years and years for it to finally sink through my thick skull about insert whatever issue you want to put here, whether it's sexism, racism, any kind of thing that I've felt like I've become awoken to in the latter part of my adult life, way embarrassingly late in my white male adult life, right? And when I think about, okay, how would you cause that to happen in someone else? Like, oh, geez, I don't know. Can you give me 10 years? Like, it's not the type of thing that you can like argue at Twitter and like, oh, I'm convinced. Now I understand racism is real. Yay. It doesn't work that way. I don't know what the solution is. And to be clear, the lesson here is not like, oh, company must be a battleground for changing each other's minds. That's not what it is at all. Like, I think one of the things that they should be thinking about is what kind of environment were we trying to make it work, and what kind of environment actually existed at work for all the different people who came to work for us. What is the experience? What has the experience of working at Basecamp been like for people who are not me and who are not exactly like me? And what is the ideal working environment that we want to create? There's always going to be conflict at work. There's always going to be multiple views. It's not the job of the CEO to change the mind of all the employees. It's not the employees to change the mind of the CEO. People can leave and get a different job if they want. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. All we're talking about is if you are a leader and you're trying to make a place where people can work, you have to decide as a leader, what kind of place do I want to make? And am I succeeding in making it be like that for everybody who works for me? And that's a super hard job, and it's much harder now than it was. We can just say, well, everyone stays at home except for the white men, and they're all going to be like me, and we're all going to have the same thoughts and ideas and the same religion and come from the same place and speak the same language, and we're going to make an environment that we like. That's way easier if you're one of those people in charge than trying to make a good place to work for everyone. And to the credit of the founders, it seems to me that they were trying to make Basecamp more inclusive than it had been. It's just that they were not prepared. They were not prepared to understand what it takes to do that. It's not as simple as we'll just hire more different kinds of people and problem solved. And that's step zero, right? All you're going to do now is reveal all the problems you didn't know you had. One more thing I'll throw in here from the Creativity Inc. thing. Success hides problems. And Basecamp has been very successful. The founders have been very successful. It's easy to think that everything is going awesome when everyone's raking in the money and people are buying your book about how to run companies. And, every time you put an opening, tons of people apply, and you get to pick really great employees. And it seems like you have an awesome little company. And like, being on that path for a long time can convince you that things really are going as well as you think they are, because how could you be so successful if they weren't? And having it slowly revealed to you that actually everything isn't as rosy as you think is counter to your notion that everything is, like, what do you mean? We're doing great. Like, everything's awesome. I'm rich. We have a New York Times bestselling book. We have awesome products. Everybody loves us. What's the problem? And it's like, that success exists. That success is helping hide problems from you. But it's not hiding them from us who are down here working with them, but it's hiding them from you, and that itself is a problem.
Yeah, I think an overwhelming impression I got for the little bit of the like actual direct quotes and stuff that I did read is that these people running this company don't seem like they're wrong a lot, or at least they don't think they're wrong a lot. And the jump to defensiveness as a reaction is almost always a bad thing, especially when dealing with issues like this. And it seems like that's their like primary mode, is like jump first to defensiveness because they can't. I think they're not accustomed to being wrong in their own minds, or the possibility that they might be wrong in their own minds. And I think like that's why you see this like huge amount of defensiveness that is quite bad.
I think they're used to being wrong in ways that they understand, because that's a big part of how you run a company. You're going to do things, you're going to do bold things, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to learn from them, but they're used to being wrong in terms that make sense to them, right? That we tried to make a decision, and now that I see that it didn't work, I now understand why it didn't work. Like it is all tractable. It is within their worldview. And here is a case where they're wrong in a way that they didn't even know what they were wrong about, right? That it was just so... And instead of themselves figuring out that they were wrong based on, I expected this to happen, but that happened, and here's the explanation, it seems like at this point they don't even yet have an explanation. They don't know what just happened. And it's much more uncomfortable to be wrong in that situation than in all the other situations where they were wrong, because I bet half their business books are filled with like, oh, we did this, we thought people would do this, so we put this product out at this price point, it turned out people didn't want to do that, but they wanted to do this, or this price was wrong, or we should have made this free. Or we decided to charge people a lot even though we weren't sure how it worked out. Like, those are decisions they're comfortably wrong about. They'll tell you, that's what business books are about. Here's what I learned from the things that I did. And this is the case where not only did they not realize they were wrong, they don't understand how or what they were wrong about, and still don't. They saw the bad consequence. They know something went wrong here, but it seems like they just don't quite get it yet. I mean, I feel like they should really just sit through every single exit interview of every single employee who's leaving the company and just let them talk to them for an hour each. And maybe that will sort of hammer home, like, when these people tell you why they're leaving, believe them, right? Because they're like, and understand how that came about based on your policies and actions of the company, right? So I get what you're saying about them getting defensive, and certainly they are. But I think part of it is like defense out of like fear of the unknown. Like what even is going on? What even is going on here? This is something bad is happening and I don't quite understand it. And what people are telling me doesn't make sense to me. So they must be the ones who are wrong, and we'll just stick to our guns and it'll be fine because it's always been fine.
We are sponsored this week by Linode, my favorite place to host servers. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your entire enterprise's infrastructure, you deserve simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions that allow you to take your project to the next level. Simplify your cloud infrastructure with Linode's Linux virtual machines. You can develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier than ever. I personally am a Linode customer. I have been for almost a decade now. And the reason why is quite simple. I've used a lot of web hosts in my day. You know, back when you were actually like leasing physical servers entirely to you, all the way into the modern age now, which is what Linode does, which is like virtualized servers. You have lots of benefits, being able to resize them and move them around and stuff like that. Tons of benefits with virtual servers. And I can tell you with all the hosts I've ever used, Linode is by far the best. That's why I've stuck with them the longest. They have amazing hardware, amazing performance and specs and everything like that. All sorts of other stuff. You know, they have new services like their S3 compatible object storage. They have managed Kubernetes and so much more at Linode. If you don't need certain resources, or if you need more resources than in one area than others, they have specialty plans. So in addition to like their regular compute plans, they have things like GPU compute plans and high memory plans, dedicated CPU plans, all that stuff. And they have amazing support if you ever need it. And all of that is brought to you at a really great value. They are the best value I've consistently seen in the hosting business. So you can go to linode.com/ATP. And you can get $100 in free credit to Linode, or text ATP to 474747 to get instant access to that $100 in free credit. Once again, linode.com/ATP, or text ATP to 474747. Get started on Linode today. Thank you so much to Linode for hosting all my servers and sponsoring our show.
David Barber writes, I'm curious to know what, if any, note-taking apps are used by the ATP hosts. Obsidian, Roam, Evernote, OneNote, just folders. How do you track notes, plans, or ideas? I am not a productivity person, and I don't switch note-taking apps all the time. I use Apple Mail, which I know is extremely not trendy. I don't really care that much. I don't really have a to-do list manager other than the app DUE, which is basically just a glorified nagging machine. But I use Apple Notes for these sorts of things. I did use Evernote way long ago, and there's still some things in there, I suppose, but I haven't looked at it in forever. I just use Apple Notes. It's fine for the sorts of things I want to capture, and it's good enough for me. John, what are you using?
I'm using Apple Notes ever since they revised it so that syncing works and everything.
Right, exactly right.
My needs are low. Like the only things I really need are a note-taking app that can do basic lists of things, supports links, synced everywhere, and I can share notes. And those features are all within Notes and seem to be pretty reliable. I'm a little bit wary of like someday losing all of my data there. So I tend to not, like, if there's anything like serious and important, I kind of feel more comfortable having it in a text file that lands in my backup vortex somehow. Because at any second, all my notes could disappear. But most of the stuff that's in Notes is just like notes, shopping lists, a bunch of snippets of text that I want to deal with. Like if they all went away, it wouldn't be that bad. I think the only really important thing I have in Notes is my squirrel list. I talk about that on Rectifs. I can just talk about it here.
On Rectifs.
Yeah. It's a list of where I squirrel stuff away in the house so I don't forget where it is because I'm old now. I guess if I lost that, it would be bad. But in the end, it's all in the house. I'll find it eventually. Or my kids will with the estate sale. Whatever.
Wow.
What about you, Marco?
Yeah, pretty similar. I've never been that much of a note taker in any form, analog or digital. But certainly in the digital world, my needs are also pretty light. And yeah, I've just been using Apple Notes for a few years now. I used to use Clear for my shopping. Like when I'd be grocery shopping, I would use Clear because it was easy to swipe through in the grocery store. I don't even do that anymore. Like I just use Apple Notes. I make, I have a grocery list that's just like a checklist, because ever since they added the checklist items, and some more of the like rich formatting stuff, I love being able to just like paste in images and stuff. I love how quick and easy it is to use it, and it mostly syncs okay most of the time. Although that being said, I've had actually recent sync issues where like I'll edit on one device and then I'll go like to my phone and the title will be incomplete and the content might not sync until like the next edit I make on the source device, and then it'll pop over. So, but that's been only a very recent thing. I assume and hope it's a temporary bug. Before that, everything was working fine for years. Yeah, my Notes app my Apple Notes app is where it's at. I share the same anxiety about it as John, about like the data format to it is completely opaque, and there are a few different ways to export data from Notes. A few different apps try to fill that role, but there's no way to then import it back in, as far as I'm concerned. So that's not particularly useful as a backup method. I do wish that Apple would solve this, and I understand why they might not want to cram that into the iOS app, but they should at least cram it into the Mac app. But yeah, otherwise, I like Apple Notes. It is simple. It is deceptively powerful for how simple it is. And I don't like everything about it. It's not perfect. No app ever is, but it's close enough to what I need and provides enough advantages, enough integration, enough convenience everywhere, and frankly, enough functionality that I'm not really looking elsewhere.
Oh, and I would say people who don't know about the document scanning feature in Notes, which I forget about for months at a time, but then remember exists. It's nice. It's this little camera icon in the app, and it will basically scan a document and like straighten it for you. You know, if you're scanned it at a slight angle or it's twisted or whatever. It's just there are plenty of apps that do a better job of this, I'm sure. But for a built-in app, don't forget that, hey, if you have a piece of paper that you want to save a picture of, instead of just bringing up the camera app and taking a picture of it and putting it in your camera roll, you can bring up a Notes document and, attach, use the document scanner and attach a nice straightened, cropped in one button press view of a page, and then just do that for multiple pages, and they can be part of a note because Notes can support, and you can export them and, as PDFs and put them into, put them wherever you want. But like, I find it much more convenient than littering my camera roll with a bunch of slightly off-center skewed pictures that I then have to manually crop and fix, and never do.
Also, if your desired output format is a PDF, like a scanned PDF of real-life paper, I don't think I mentioned this in the show, but I very recently learned that you can do that in the Files app on iOS, and it can scan directly to a PDF there. There is a way, like you can do it from a Mac. You can do it with Preview, where it'll use like the continuity camera thing to use your phone's camera from your Mac's Preview app to capture the document, but it's clunky and a little unreliable, and just kind of, it's a lot of like manual weird back and forth. So if you are trying to use your phone as a document scanner to scan to a PDF, definitely do the built-in scanner thing in the Files app for basic needs. Again, as John said, there are a million other apps that do like better, more professional or more option-filled versions of document scanning. But if your needs are basic like me, the built-in one in the Files app is fine.
Why would you just do the scanning in the Notes app and then go to print it, and then you can make a PDF that way? Did you know that trick? I assume you knew that trick. I'm serious. I wouldn't even think to go to the Files app. Yeah, so if you go to print anything in iOS, and then it's some completely obtuse gesture, I think you need to like pinch out, so I guess the opposite of pinch, you need to expand in order to get like a full screen preview. And then once you're in that...
From the print dialogue?
Yes. I'm not messing with you. I am not trolling you at all. So hold on. Now I got to try this live. It's going to be fun for you to edit. So I'm in Safari.
I had no idea there was a PDF export in iOS.
Yeah, so I'm in Safari, and I go and I use the share sheet, and I go to print. Okay, so then I'm looking at, just so happened I had ATP up, so I have to do the opposite pinch, so not bring in but push out.
I'm totally doing this. Hold on.
And then you see a PDF version, and then it has a share sheet or a share icon in the upper right.
Wait, hold on.
Okay, so go to print. This is the best programming ever. All right, so do you see there's like a print preview at the bottom, right?
Hang on, I just tried to print a web page and it totally didn't work, so I'm going to try like an email. I don't know what else I'm going to... All right, hold on.
So...
Wait, how do you do an action from mail?
You have to do the reply thing, don't you? All right. Well, let me follow along in mail then. Just make sure we're seeing the same thing.
So I'm zooming out.
Okay. So you do. Where is it? Print. Yep. And then you see the print preview, and you pinch to zoom into it. I'm sorry. So
zoom in.
Yeah. It's. How do you describe the opposite? The anti-pinch.
Save to files.
And then you can do all number of things. But if you look, it says...
So you have to go to the second action sheet nested inside the first action sheet that got you to the print dialog.
Correct.
This is ridiculous.
Do an anti-pinch. Oh, it's totally ridiculous, but it does work.
And then zoom in with the pinch on the previewed pages that I guess make them logically open up a PDF. I mean, this honestly, this kind of seems like an accidental feature. But wow, this is like the epitome of the worst of touch design, because this is completely undiscoverable. And even when you told me to do it, I still couldn't figure it out for a while.
Yep. When you scan documents and notes, they end up as PDFs too, I think. I mean, certainly when
they do. They're just inside a note. So like
yeah, but you can get them out very easily by just holding down.
Yeah, but like if you are scanning a document with your phone camera for the purpose of getting a PDF, you're better off doing it directly in the Files app and save you a couple steps, rather than scanning it into a note for no other reason other than that you knew Notes did this, and then deleting the note or whatever. Like that's not as good.
Normally it's like attached to a note where you want to sort of have annotations. Like I'm usually like, let's say I'm shopping for couches and we're seeing a bunch of different couches, and I want to like basically save like the little tag that's on it to say, oh, we saw this couch and here's all the information about it, the serial number, the blah, blah, blah. Like in the notes document where we're keeping track of the couches we're looking at, scan document. Yep, there's the little tag. And then move on to the next one. So it's a series of notes about couches, pictures of the tag, and then photos of the actual couches. All, it's a rich text document.
Who knew? Just a couple of quick shout outs actually before we move on. For grocery shopping, I think notes is perfectly fine, but I really, really like AnyList. I think I've brought it up before. We'll put a link in the show notes. They do shared shopping lists really well, including with photo annotations and quantities and things. And this isn't exactly note taking, but I should mention Day One. I don't recall if they've ever sponsored the show before, but I really love Day One. Actually, AnyList may have sponsored many, many years ago. But anyway, both of those, whether or not they've ever sponsored, really, really love both those apps. Day One is a journaling app, and that's where I keep memories from like the family, because I have the world's worst memory, and things that I want to remember I keep in Day One. So moving right along, Zarf Sharf writes, what do you prefer developing against, an ancient API or technology that's basically abandoned but the bug workarounds are well known, or a modern API or technology that's constantly being updated and changed? This is a really good question, and I feel like I don't have one consistent answer. I mean, I look at what I'm working on right now, and I'm using SwiftUI exclusively and Combine, and that has its fair share of problems. So I'm enjoying it, except when I'm not. So I don't know. I think I am too distractible by the new shiny that I probably would prefer something modern and new, even though intellectually and the mature developer in me knows that that's the incorrect answer. John, what do you think?
I mean, the way this is phrased, I have to go with the modern one, just because like the ancient one that's basically abandoned, yeah, the bug workarounds are known, but working on any tech that is sort of basically no longer supported but abandoned gets real bad real fast, right? You don't want to be the last one using a particular technology for any purpose, right? Whereas working on the new thing that's constantly being updated and changed, that means it's constantly improving too. And that means that's where the action is. That means you probably don't have to be the one to fix every single bug that you ever find, because so many other people are fixing and updating or whatever. So in practice, I think that's what everybody does. Yes, even Marco, like, you don't want to be on something that nobody is supporting anymore. Now, PHP doesn't qualify for that, because it's not like PHP is abandoned. People are working on it all the time. They're making new versions. They're fixing bugs. Like, it's still used by tons of people, right? An actual technology that is, quote unquote, basically abandoned means like you're out there using it and nobody else is. Like, it won't even build on your machine eventually. Like, it's just, everyone moves to ARM and it's still x86, and you have to figure out how to compile it for ARM if you want to keep using it. You got to go with the one that's constantly being updated and changed, because that means people are working on it, and that means it's improving.
What do you think, Marco?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this, actually, because, John brings up a good point. Like, if you are the last one using something that, it might get abandoned or it might get discontinued or broken That being said, you never want to be building on quicksand. So it's one of those things where the answer is it depends. In an ideal world, you build something once and then you never need to revisit it unless you want to. That's not always what you get, though. And so in the real world, sometimes old technologies break because no one's minding them. No one's maintaining them, no one's minding the store, no one is testing against them. So that's not great to be relying on. On the other side of the coin, though, when I build against an API, I'm trying to build something else. I'm trying to build something on top of it. The whole thing is I want to do this work and then never have the API cause problems for me or surprise me or require more time from me unnecessarily. So obviously it's not great if it's still very much in flux. And so if abandoned means inactive, if it's not being actively improved upon, but that it's still around and working and that doesn't seem to be changing, that's fine with me. And that's usually a safe bet for me. But if it seems like it's not even going to be supported in the near future, that's when I bail.
Yeah, abandoned is not the same as boring.
Yeah, the way this question is phrased, it's it's not PHP versus Swift UI, it's Cold Fusion versus Swift UI. and given a choice between Cold Fusion and Swift UI, Marco chooses Swift UI.
Although, I'll tell you what. So the way I spent yesterday was there was this bug where Forecast, my app, my MP3 encoder app, was outputting weird things or crashing with certain types of wave file inputs. If there was a wave file that was above 2 to the 31 bytes, so 2.2 gigs or whatever that is, or 2.1, whatever it is, if it was above that but less than 4 gigs, so in the unsigned 32-bit integer size range, but not the signed range. So if it was so between 2 and 4 gigs, if it was a wave file exported from Adobe Audition, then the system audio libraries, specifically the ext audio file API, but I think pretty much any of Apple's platform audio libraries, would misread the end of the wave file and would basically blow right past where the audio sample data ends and read whatever metadata happened to be after it as if it were audio data. And so it would output garbage audio, and that would, in Forecast, that would result in either garbage audio at the end of a file, or in some cases, Forecast would crash because a function deep inside the MP3 encoder would try to read that as audio, and some assumptions about the way audio flows would not be met, and it would crash. So it was a terrible bug, and I spent the whole day looking at the specs of this ancient file format of the WAV file, which is the RIF WAV file format from forever ago, and looking up okay, how is this being read? How should this be being read? Is the size of the chunk supposed to be a signed integer or an unsigned integer? Whose bug is this basically? Is it mine? Is it Apple's? Is it Adobe Audition's bug? Who knows? And it turns out it's Apple's. So I had to file the bug report and everything. But so I was dealing with all these old formats, which one of the things I thought about those. But the reason I brought this up now is I actually went through and I did the stupid sysdiagnose and everything they wanted for me to file the bug report, and I made a sample project. So I kept adjusting things between my sample project and Forecast to try to isolate the bug, and it turns out it's super easily isolatable. And I made the entire sample project in Objective-C because it was easiest and fastest to do the thing I had to prove, and Forecast is still all Objective-C. And as much as I'm enjoying using Swift for Overcast now...
Oh, here we go.
My God, Objective-C apps build so fast. It was shocking.
You and your compile times in a toy
oh my
app
God.
That, it's the difference of seconds. Who cares?
No, it's not seconds. It's
for your toy app though, for your sample project, right? Of course, it's building fast. It has 10 lines of code in it.
For Forecast too. Because Forecast is a medium-sized app. It's not a large app. But it's medium, and it builds instantly. And other simple stuff like the code auto completion was so fast. Like all that stuff, so much of it was fast. Debugging was amazing because it not only worked but was fast, and there were so many weird like debugging type system error messages and fights that Swift would pick with me that I didn't have to deal with, and like just everything about working with Objective-C besides writing it. Everything else was so fast.
You get someone else to write it, and you'll just hit the compile button,
right? Like, but the compilation, the debug and run loop, actual debugging, all the build, the archive, everything. Oh my god, so much faster than Swift. It really spoiled me, and I realized, like, oh man, Swift has a long way to go before it's anywhere near as responsive to edit and work with as Objective-C.
It reminds me of rebooting back into macOS 9 on my Blue and White Power Mac G3 after using the early versions of OS 10 for a while. You reboot into macOS 9 and like, wow, my computer's fast. Look how fast these menus pull down. This is amazing. Oh, yeah. Technology marches on. Speaking of your signed 32-bit Apple framework bug, I saw you tweet about that, and then like not 50 tweets later, there was another one on a similar. I don't know if this has been proved. You figured out that that's actually the case with your thing, but this was someone saying that Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, the shares of Berkshire Hathaway are so expensive now that they rolled over the apparent signed 32-bit integer. They're like $400,000 each or something, but they do like 5 decimal places of cents after it or something like that. So it was like so that what they said was that apparently it's some kind of signed 32-bit thing, and they got like delisted due to a computer error, and they're going to fix it. I find that somewhat hard to believe, but it is coincidental that the number really got up to around the 32-bit value before it screwed up.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, like I guess if they're treating it as an integer that just is like multiplied by 10,000 or whatever. Yeah, wow.
I mean, or maybe it wasn't signed. Maybe it was 32-bit, and then we need to go to 64. It seems like it's not supported by the facts because I can't imagine that's really true. But
oh yeah, look at that 424,840. It's real close. If you would multiply it, because it's 429, 496. That's the 32-bit. So they're at 424,840. Like they're very close to that. So that makes total sense. Like
it's like a reasonable assumption whenever this system was designed in the 80s or something. Someone's saying, okay, and this is where we're going to store the share price. What's a big enough? How many digits is enough for the share price of a company? No one thinks any company is going to have a single share that's going to be worth $400,000 or something, right? Or whatever. It just seems ridiculous in 1980, and here we are.
That's amazing.
Who PhD writes, I've been waiting for an APFS deduping space saver script to move from alpha quality to beta quality, or, quote, reliable enough for my less important data that suck up space. Have you heard of disk de-dupe on the App Store? I have not, and I don't think you're asking me anyway. John, what do you think?
So this is an interesting technology enabled by our wonderful modern new file system that we have here on the Mac. It's been around for a long time in the enterprise. The idea is that on every one of our disks, but especially on lots of enterprise disks, there's some data that's duplicated, right? You might think you don't have a lot of like literal duplicate documents, but it's sort of the enterprise level. A lot of devices do block level deduping, right? So if they can find any part of a file that's exactly the same as some part of another file, there's no reason to store that block of data twice. You can just store it once and point to it from both files. And this saves you space, right? So, like, say you have a bunch of JPEG images, and they have a bunch of, metadata inside them, and the metadata for a whole bunch of them is similar or the same, like a bunch of pictures taken, at your home, and the GPS coordinates are always the same. And, obviously it's not down to the byte level that they're deduping or whatever, but the more granular you can get with your deduping, the higher chance you have to find redundancies and the more space you can save, right? Even just deduping at a file level, though, sometimes you do have complete duplicates of files in multiple locations. Sometimes maybe the OS has them. Maybe some resources or assets are in multiple places. Maybe you have 2 of the same file somewhere, or like one in your account and one elsewhere. If you have music libraries that are, if you have multiple accounts on your computer and the music library is not shared among them with a single Apple ID, you could have the same songs in multiple places because you and your spouse both have the complete works of Taylor Swift separately in your own music libraries on your Mac that's shared between the two of you. Now you're storing all that data twice. Wouldn't it be great if you could store it once? What APFS has for you here is that APFS can do this was brought up a couple of WWDCs ago, can do the sort of like instantaneous clone of a file. You can see this in the Finder. If you make a copy of like a gigantic file and it looks like it completes instantly, wait a second, how did it just duplicate that 4 gig file instantly? Well, it didn't. It used the, I forget what it's called, like smart cloning or whatever. APFS just says, okay, I will just make a second pointer to that file. Now, it's not the same thing as hard links in Unix, because hard links in Unix, you can make an quote-unquote instant copy of a file, but they both point to the same data. So if you make a 4 gig file and then you make a hard link to it, and you edit either one, the original file or the hard link, you will change the other, right? But with APFS smart cloning instant, whatever the hell it's called thing, when you make a copy, you don't have to worry that now when I edit one, the other one will edit. They are independent as soon as you make a change. So they're copy on write, right? So you instantly get a copy without actually taking up any more disk space. But if you change some part of the copy, they will start to diverge from each other, right? So it's a safe way to make an instant copy. So the way the deduping things work is they go through, in theory, they go through your entire hard drive or whatever. They find 2 files that are the same. This is like sort of like the transporter in Star Trek, I guess, or cloning or whatever. They find 2 files that are the same. They delete one, and then they make a smart clone of the original to the second location, right? So now, I mean, it's complicated by the fact that when they deleted that one, it probably didn't actually go away because it probably exists in a snapshot, right? And so you didn't actually, but pretend snapshots don't exist for a second. So you've got 2 4 gig files that are identical. They're taking up 8 gigs of space. Again, ignoring snapshots, right? You delete one of the 4 gig files. Now you've saved 4 gigs of disk space. Not really, but in theory. And then you clone the original 4 gig file, and that takes up no more space except for a tiny little bit for the metadata, right? So now you previously those 2 4 gig files were taking 8 gigs, and you can make it so those 2 4 gig files are only taking up 4 gigs. And you don't have to worry about any weird side effects because you can edit one or the other, and they will be completely independent files. They won't be linked to each other in any way, except for the fact that they were originally cloned from each other. So in theory, you could save a ton of disk space that way. In practice, apps like this, especially when they come from a third party and not Apple, scare me because what I just described, and the reason I'm comparing to the Star Trek transporter is the idea that it destroys all your molecules in the original location and then sends the information elsewhere and then reconstitutes them. So the transporter essentially kills you. There's a million YouTube videos on this if you want to watch it. It kills you and then reconstructs you elsewhere. Aside. In this case, it has to delete one of the files, and then it has to do the smart cloning thing to reconstitute that file from a clone in exactly the way that it was before, including all the dates, all the permissions, all the metadata, the labels, all this other stuff. And that scares me a little bit because it is not a non-destructive operation. You must necessarily destroy one of the files and try to recreate it, quote unquote, exactly the way it was. So if Apple came out with a utility that did this, I might trust it. But third-party ones, and I did actually buy this one here, I am very wary of. I'd be wary of trying to do it myself. Now, maybe you can make like a command line tool that does this. It's not complicated. This API for the smart cloning, you can just look it up and run it, right? Maybe if there's files that are just, these are just data files, there's no metadata, I don't care about them. Like they're Taylor Swift songs, right? If I screw them up, worst case, I can just delete them all and re-download them from iTunes. Like it's not a big deal. Maybe I would trust it in that scenario. But for now, I would say use caution when considering tools like this. The best thing you can say for tools like this is if you can run them in kind of a read-only mode and say, look, I'm not going to do any deduping, but just please tell me how many duplicate files do I have? And if they could all be deduped, how much space would I save? Again, setting aside snapshots, which are a thing.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Squarespace, ExpressVPN, and Linode. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join. And we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYL. ISS, so that's Casey List, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse, it's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Speaking of members, I'm glad to see, apparently, customers finally taking advantage of what I urged them to do last time, which is, hey, sign up to become a member, get the discount, buy crap from the store, and then cancel.
To be fair, we don't encourage you to cancel.
Yeah, we don't encourage you to cancel, but like last year, like it seemed like nobody was, like people were buying from the store, but there was like no increase in members. It's like, why are you not taking advantage of the free money that we're offering you here? Become a member, get the discount, buy stuff with it, and then cancel.
Or stick around
or
if you want to.
Cancel.
Because
can
you
we
love
stop?
us.
Can we stop with the cancel?
Like we know that some percentage of people will forget to cancel. Like that's part of the subscription thing. We make it super easy to cancel, but if you forget to cancel, that's on you because we make it so easy to cancel.